My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Welcome to the Bread and Thorns podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Bread and Thorns podcast, a bi-weekly podcast where we sit down and discuss literature, art, media, and other stuff that we really like and how they influence the projects that we ourselves are working on. I'm Isaac.
And I'm Rosemary.
And today we are going to discuss
The Princess Bride!
Woo!
Yes!
Very, very famous movie made in 1987.
An absolute classic.
Something that Rosemary really loves.
Absolutely adores.
I think you've been watching it since your childhood, right?
Very, very young. Like, I literally can't remember the first time I ever watched this. So it's just been a part of my life, just like eating, drinking, and breathing has. So it's very,
and
very
now it's
important.
in your top 10 movies of all time. And do you want to reveal what number it is?
So it's actually my number 4. It used to be number 2.
Wow.
But right now it's at number 4.
So it decreased in quality, or?
It was more like there were other movies that fit my qualifications better when I was going through and revamping my top 10 this time around. And so it was just...
But it's still in your top 5, so it's
still
very,
in my
very
top 5.
good.
It is still extremely important and very, very precious and very dear to my heart. This is one of the movies that has set unrealistic standards for me for ages. So
unrealistic
this is great.
standards.
It's just
Would you say
it's
like
great.
this still influences you when you write, or is it just something that you're like?
I would say kind of like the whole like breathing and eating. It affects all of my
Oh,
life.
okay.
It's not just the writing. It's
you
also
breathe
like,
Inigo Montoya.
Hey, if somebody's gonna kill my dad and I'm gonna spend 20 years of my life becoming the best sword master in the world so I can look my dad's killer in the face and say, my name is Rosemary Rieger, you killed my father, prepare to die. like just sorry guys, that was aggressive, but I love this movie
aggressive
so
sound.
much.
Perfect for a podcast.
It's so good. I adore this movie, and so this is definitely on my list, not Isaac's. But what did you think about a movie I care a lot about?
We discussed this before, but it's a movie that's definitely better than Palm Springs. So.
Setting the bar low by
setting the
stating
bar.
that for him.
Well, the bar is pretty high for you, right? In terms of Palm Springs, it's definitely better than that. When I was watching it, it's still a movie that I don't feel like I wouldn't go back on purpose to watch it. I would watch it maybe with my kids as they're growing up, and
despite the fact that so many of his friends, myself included, have highly recommended this movie to him, he's still just like, well, this is okay. And I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, I mean, I could see why like kids would really love this movie. It's very kind of that swashbuckling fantasy adventure comedy film.
It is delightful,
and it has those kind of entertaining, pleasurable moments.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, I just watched this, right?
Yeah.
This movie was made in 1987. It was directed and produced by Rob Reiner, and then stars Carrie Ells, Robin Wright, all these people, and apparently I don't know any of these people other than Andre the Giant. When I was watching the movie,
most people who actually watch this movie, he is the main person that they know, which I thought was hilarious because he's the only one I really don't ever see anywhere else, and so he's amazing. Like, when I rewatched this movie this time, I actually watched it with a friend, and it was something where he knew a lot more about Andre the Giant than I did.
Oh, okay.
And so I actually got like a little in depth of like, oh.
Yeah,
he was a cool guy.
He was an interesting guy.
I didn't even know who he really was outside of he did fighting, and he was known for his size.
Right.
Like that was what I knew.
That was his thing.
And
so, yeah, I remember. I think a couple years. No, this is like a decade back now. I think I was reading an article about him in like BuzzFeed or something like that, and that's how I knew about Andre the Giant. I didn't know about Andre the Giant because of The Princess Bride. I didn't actually know he was in the movie until
you started watching it.
Yeah, I started watching it, or not. I started watching it because we have to watch it for the podcast. Yeah. I kind of looked up some information about it, and so I thought, oh, this is where Andre the Giant comes from in a sense. And so
he had a reputation and other things before this.
Yeah.
This was his little foray into
into
this side of the movie world. But
Yeah, so I can
But yeah,
see why it's a great kids movie. I definitely would probably show it to my kids when they're young, and maybe they'll turn out like you and love it when they're adults. But for me, because I guess I watched it as an adult.
Your kids are gonna be mad at you. If they're anything like me, they're just gonna be like upset. Like, Dad, how did you not like this movie?
I'll pretend to enjoy it.
That's worse. That's worse.
The Princess
That's
Bride
so
will be
much
the Santa
worse.
Claus of my house,
How dare you.
or the fairy, the Tooth Fairy.
The Tooth Fairy actually terrified me a little bit. Like, I never, like, thankfully my parents didn't. I hope none of you still believe in this, but, like, my parents never really taught me to believe in, like, Santa Claus or to the Tooth Fairy as, like legendary little things that come in and creep into your house in a way that's not legal or safe.
So
And,
you didn't picture the fairy as this cute little
No. I didn't
Tinkerbell.
care if she was cute. I was
Oh.
like, why the heck are you trying to take my teeth?
Oh,
Like,
right.
why?
Okay.
What are you building with this? Like, why do you care?
She has a
like, it was
castle
like just
made
as
of
a concept.
teeth across the human
Like,
era.
the Tooth Fairy is one of those things that just always seemed more horror to me than like fairy tale.
Actually, you know what? Maybe there should be a horror
There
movie
absolutely
made.
totally should. I feel like there is one.
There probably is.
I
one.
have friends who would know these things. I don't. But anyway, but
Halloween
so
is coming up,
that
so
is true.
maybe we should watch a
No.
Tooth Fairy horror
No.
movie. It'll just be a bunch of kids with no teeth.
No, that's
And-
worse. No, it could be one with dolls, and so all the dolls have living human teeth. This is really
But it
bad.
has
That's
to be
really-
like
I don't like that.
like lifelike dolls, right? And they come
Yeah.
into your house at like
I don't like
poltergeists or
it.
whatever, and they
I
have
don't
no
like
teeth.
it.
They're the agents of the Tooth Fairy.
I'm not.
Anyways.
Anyway, back to the
Princess
movie I
Bride.
actually like and want to watch. So again, I grew up with this movie, and one of the reasons why it is a really good movie for kids, as he's very succinctly pointed out, it's something where the story starts off with this grandfather reading this fantasy swashbuckling adventure to his
Wait, did you
his
just say
sick grandson.
succinctly?
Yes.
I'm not sure that word means what you think it means.
How dare you use this against me? Oh my goodness.
There you go. I used the quote. Good job. Good job, Isaac.
I was trying to come up with a less negative word than what I had in mind, okay? Anyway, Grandpa telling a bedtime story to his grandson, who doesn't really want to spend a whole lot of time with his very, very sweet and overly caring grandfather. And so the story that the grandpa decides to tell him is this adventure/love story, but definitely heavily leaning on the adventure side, where these two people who really, really love each other lose each other and find each other again through a series of adventures and mishaps and kidnappings and through death and dismay and theoretical engagements and
All things that little kids love.
Absolutely. Well, maybe not the engagement part, but definitely the near death and the swashbuckling and the cliff climbing and the sword fighting and wrestling and the poisoning and stuff.
I
It's all
did like
great.
the cliff climbing.
The cliff climbing is definitely fun.
It was
Get
quite
some good lines out of that.
endearing to watch Andre
Yeah.
the Giant just pull up on
Yeah.
that road.
Especially the insult that you like, the hippopotamic landmass. It's just great. It's just so good. But yeah, so this is a movie that I pretty much know forward and backwards, and so it was really interesting because this last time that I watched it for this podcast was the first time that I'd ever actually watched it while being analytical about it.
Okay.
I just enjoyed the movie before this because it's one of my favorite movies. It's like one of my
Right.
family's favorite
It's like
movies.
a guilty pleasure, but also actual
Okay.
pleasure kind of.
Yeah, I'm like,
kind of
it's
movie.
not guilty pleasure.
Right, you're
There's
not- you
no
don't feel
guilt.
guilty about
Okay,
it.
until I talked to you, there
Okay.
wasn't any guilt about
Oh.
this movie.
Mission
But
accomplished.
yeah, that's literally he
Just kidding.
wants me to question everything about my life apparently.
No, just the
Any-
Princess Bride and maybe Palm Springs.
Okay, this is the second movie from my list. Don't say things like it's only these two. You haven't.
Oh yeah,
seen.
technically it's
We
100% of the
haven't.
movie so far. Right?
It's 100% failed to keep Isaac interested. However, I love these movies, and my list is also different than his, and so it's something where he kind of went through his list of like the five things that made a movie part of his top 10 best movies of all time. For me, I only have 4. But they are really, really important. And so it's something where for me, I need lovable characters, okay? I need people that I can vibe with, that I can see them and I'm falling in love with them, and you cheer for them, you root for them, you cry when they cry, or you laugh when they cry, depending on what they're crying about. Like, I want lovable characters. And so that's always really important for me. Number 2 is well-written dialogue, okay? And so that's so, like, dudes, like, if the words don't work, it doesn't matter how pretty it is, it doesn't matter how great the casting is, if the words don't fit, if it doesn't match the beauty of the rest of the movie, you're losing me.
And that's something that's really interesting about this movie, because it was made as a spoof, right? It was based on a book that was an abridged version of a very long book.
So, okay, the original book was a satire. So it was originally supposed to be funny. It was supposed to be a commentary on social things. And then, in the abridged version, you actually find out that the reason why there is an abridged version is because the writer's dad read the original book to him as a kid, but he left out a lot of parts because nobody wants to read about unpacking a suitcase for 57 pages. Like, so he just says, no, not anymore.
That is the satire, right?
That's part of the satire. She does it 3 times. There's the packing of the suitcase. There's crossing the sea, and then there's the unpacking of the suitcase on the other side. There's a waste and it's the same clothing, and there's a waste of like 197 pages or something like this of just describing what she is packing.
That sounds amazing.
And then unpacking. Like,
maybe I need to read this book.
No, really, and that's what I was discussing is like, Isaac would enjoy the satire. I enjoy the abridged version and the commentary on the satire. Anyway.
I wonder if anyone's read that part of the book and just did a PhD on that section of the book.
I really hope nobody is that pathetic.
Maybe it's really interesting.
I really just... All right. Some people maybe someone from like Gucci or like that's what inspired The Devil Wears Prada is like you have someone who's like the fashion industry is. Ooh. Anyway, okay, so basically Dad was reading the story to a sick kid, and he loved the story. So when his kid got sick, or I think around the age of 12, he was like, oh, my dad read me this story. You're going to love it. It's going to be great. The kid picks up the book and doesn't finish the first chapter because he's like, this is so boring, Dad. What did you do to me? And so when Dad actually reads the book, he's like, this isn't the book my dad read. What on earth? And so he's like, I can't do this. Like, I love this story so much. So he fixes the story. So you basically have a nerd who fixes his favorite story so that way it looks like his favorite story.
Dog, huh?
No,
so you
it's
don't
more
get
like
dogs.
It's more
I'm
like
just kidding.
I don't know.
I don't think it was the right metaphor.
Just
it just came into
again,
my
it's
mind.
supposed to be a bedtime story. So this is supposed to be a bedtime story, and it's supposed to be engaging. If you don't engage kids, they are gonna not fall asleep in a bad way. Like it's not gonna work. Anyway, and so with the actual story that is being told, you go through the kidnappings, you go through the murder mysteries and stuff. Not murder mystery. Well, it's not a mystery, but there is kind of a murder.
It's not really a mystery.
It's mostly a murder.
But to kids, it's a murder and a mystery, right? So.
The mystery is how are we gonna keep him conscious? But but no, so it's something where this movie has always been a part of my life, and one of the things that it has is that it has really well written dialogue. The characters are really into it with each other. There's so much wit and sass and irony and just great lines that have been used and memorized and loved for the decades since this movie came out. But my number 3 is that it has to be beautiful, and when I say beautiful, I mean like cinematically, like musically, like the costumes have to be gorgeous. This movie does actually have 2 of my favorite costumes of all time, and it's basically Buttercup's red dress when they're like running and fleeing and things when she's kidnapped, and then Wesley's pirate costume when that's going on. Like, those are my 2 favorite outfits of all time, and I will at some point own them.
This movie came out before Mask of Zorro, right? And so that Mask of Zorro movie, I'm guessing, was based on this one, or was there a very
I feel like the actual Legend of Zorro should predate this.
Right.
Because I believe there's history involved, and I don't want to sound too ignorant, so I'm gonna leave it at that.
Well, but you just saying that,
I know. I'm just letting you know. If you know something, feel free to tell me.
Let us know.
If I'm just gonna leave it there, but I'm pretty sure the movies came out in the 90s.
Right, that's what I was referring to.
So they did come after, and the costume, it would make sense if parts of it was based off this, because it's a fabulous costume. Like, oh my goodness!
And I mean, it has a kind of Western film kind of historical idea.
Good.
So, yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, so great costuming, but it's just it needs to be beautiful. And then the last thing, which this is totally not on Isaac's list at all whatsoever, but I like a well-written happy ending. And if you don't have a well-written happy ending, you're not making it on my top 10. because these are my favorite movies of all time, and I watch movies so that way I can feel good about the world. They give me a sense of hope and a sense of peace and a sense of joy, and I want to move forward and like, you know what? Maybe I can change the world. Maybe I can have a good day. Like sometimes there are movies that you watch and you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go out and talk to people because I'm gonna be disappointed. Like it's like I don't like those movies. Like or I can enjoy them, but they're not my favorites. They're not something I want to watch 10 times a year. Like there's got to be at least a few years where I've watched this at least 10 to 15 times in a year, if not considerably more than that.
Yes, I think like those kinds of movies. Well, we can't say every movie brings the same amount of emotion or hope
That's true.
towards
Absolutely.
everybody, right? And so what I guess my question would be kind of what brings you hope, or what makes a movie's ending happy or good for you?
I feel like that's kind of the whole thing with so I'm gonna do 2 book series. One of the just so A Series of Unfortunate Events is actually one of my favorite series book wise, and it's really, really depressing. But even though it's depressing, there's still people who are trying to help, even if they're useless, even if they're pointless, even if they're going through and they're not actually helping the kids. At the very, very, very end of the storyline, you have the chance that maybe next time someone will help, and if not, we can get out of it ourselves. And so the kids are always very self-reliant, and so it's something where it's one of those, even if you can't trust anyone else, you can trust the people that you love.
Right.
And they'll be there for you as best as they can. And so then you switch over to something like Harry Potter, where the whole point of Harry Potter is you have this boy who's been abused and mistreated, and everyone treats him either like he's this mini god, or he's like this horrible person who just should be abused and mistreated. And he is able to always have a happy ending. Each of the books has except for Half-Blood Prince, each of the books has something to hold on to moving forward.
Well, even like, Half-Blood Prince had some sort of hope.
Yeah, there was still
the
hope.
Yeah.
There's still something there. Even after Sirius dies, like you know that there's hope to go
forward.
Prince. No, I know. I'm saying different books. Sorry. Okay. Just throughout the things, okay? Multiple books.
Spoiler alert. We always insert these spoiler alerts way far into the actual podcast.
Yes.
We apologize.
True. You just, I hope.
Dear listeners, we apologize.
Yeah.
But spoiler alert.
Anyway, but like even after all these tragic and terrible things happen, there's always something good to look forward to. There's always like we have hope for a future, and so.
Yeah, I think that's why I would actually rate The Matrix as a very positive movie, right? Because just as you said, with A Series of Unfortunate Events, you have these. Abusive
dark,
background,
depressing world.
And then same thing with The Matrix, but the ending message is very, very hopeful.
I actually didn't get the message until we talked about it after we talked about it, but it was something where for me, The Matrix was always super depressing at the end. That's one of the reasons why I don't watch it very often, is because to me at the end you have, the 90% of the people who haven't been saved and don't want to be saved are going to continue to not want to be saved. Versus when we talked about it, you pointed out how his being like the savior, the one, that him being able to show people inside the Matrix that the Matrix isn't real is going to convert or convince more people to be open to letting themselves be free of this fake reality.
Right. And so there's that element of that hope in there.
So there is an element of hope in that for the first movie.
But The Princess Bride is much happier ending.
Yeah. Well, okay. And the really funny part is that's just in the movie. The book is actually slightly more depressing in the end, which I didn't realize.
I didn't know that.
But yeah, no, the pill that Wesley takes actually wears off. And then Andre the Giant gets lost, and then the prince is catching up with them, and Inigo's like bleeding out still, and then Buttercup's like, wait, no guys, I'm only myself, I can't fight off all these guys. And so they leave you in suspense in the book. They don't actually tell you what happens, so everyone starts falling apart and you don't know what happens.
Even in the abridged version?
Yeah.
Or okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. In the abridged version there's a warning, so it's like, hey, if you want the happy ending, you'll stop reading now.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And then they go into
it's like an editor's note that's in there.
Oh no, there's so many editor's notes. Oh my gosh, that's the one. Oh my gosh, if you have the time, the abridged version is delightful. But the movie is definitely way more happy ending, and it is well written because they go through trials, they go through tribulations, they definitely get banged up and hurt and bruised and stabbed multiple times.
You know what would have been really great is if the movie. If it was kind of made now, But then, so after the credits are over, you get the
That would be awful, dude.
other ending.
That would be horrible.
Well, it would be more faithful
I
to
would
the
never
original
watch
story.
the rest of the movie.
Right, yeah, but that's what I'm saying,
Never.
right? With the editor's note, right? So the credits serve that editor's note function, and then you have
I feel
the
like
ending.
you'd have to have like a little like in bold warning towards the end of like, hey, if you want your hopes and dreams to stay alive, turn off your TV now. But,
And it could just be the kid like opening the book when after the grandpa left,
Yo,
and he's reading that part.
Childhood ruined.
Right.
Oh. And it makes sense because in the movie at the end, like the reason why the grandpa would end it where he does is because at one point he's like really worried that like Wesley is actually dead or that Buttercup's actually not going to be with Wesley, that she actually marries Humperdinck, the prince. And so he's really concerned. So it makes sense why the grandpa wouldn't tell him. There's a possibility that they all die and she ends up becoming the princess/queen or also dying anyways. And
So what were your favorites? Because I have my list of kind of not like favorite as in I love them super or a lot, but you know, just things that I thought was really well done. So what are kind of your favorite lines or pieces of dialogue or sets?
Okay,
from the
favorite
movie?
lines is almost impossible to do because all of the lines in this movie are so good, dude. just no, like hippopotamic landmass, inconceivable, as you wish.
You're just gonna go through
you
the
killed
list.
my father, prepared to like they're so good. Like I'm not a witch, I'm your wife. Like just there's so many. He's just mostly dead, or like to blave. Oh, he probably just owes you money. Like it's like. The only times where I'm ever not in awe or just appreciating how brilliantly written this movie is, just from a dialogue perspective, is usually when the prince and Count Rogan open their mouths, and even then it's still good. They're still sadistic and sassy and rude in their own way. That's
Right, there's
delightful.
moments of like exposition only, but then they always kind of sandwich it with the happy dialogue or the sassy dialogue that you're talking
Or they're
about.
like, what about the ROUSs?
All
Frankly, I don't believe they exist. Chomp. Like it's just it's so no, I can't pick favorite lines. But no, but
I can.
Okay, fine. Go for
I
your
can
favorite
definitely
lines.
pick favorite lines.
Yes. What's ours, Isaac?
But well, I can say this was my first time watching the movie.
Yeah.
And I had gone into this movie. I think my experience watching this was kind of interesting because this movie has so many memes and just very popular culture. I guess internet references and all this kind of stuff. And so I had seen the "My name is Inigo Montoya" meme for the longest time, but I didn't know that it came from The Princess Bride. And so when it came to that scene, the first time he says it, I was like, oh, this is it. You know, this is where he says it.
This is the scene.
I was actually very relieved when it was first introduced because I was afraid I wasn't going to like it when that scene came. But I really did like it when he says, "My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." That was great. And so I really liked his character as well. I think
the intensity, the realness of his character.
That character was, I think, the best done in the entire movie.
He's
I really
probably
appreciated
the best actor.
it. So that was one of my favorites. The second one was when the Count. I only know him as Christopher Guest.
Count Rogan.
Count Rogan. There you go. Count Rogan.
The six-fingered man.
Yeah, when he was torturing Wesley. Wesley, right? And he asks him, "How do you feel?" And Wesley's just like, and Count Rogan goes, "Interesting."
As
that was brilliantly
true scientist would do.
Yeah. And it's just that I think the exchange of that dialogue was so well done. Just if you're getting tortured, you're not going to say anything profound or
it hurts. Like no,
you're not going to say that. You're just going to cry and sob. Interesting. And so I think those were my two favorite parts of the movie. Oh, and the part where Andre the Giant, when Wesley was coming in, he's in the mask, and he doesn't know Andre the Giant is there, and Andre the Giant throws this rock in front of him, and he said something along the lines of, "I didn't want to be unsportsmanlike," or whatever. Yeah. I thought that was a very
unsportsmanlike.
Yeah. And so now
he's like, "I think we should face each other as God intended." You mean I'll put down my sword and you'll put down your rock and we'll fight this out like civilized people?
Right, yeah, there you go. And so that was I think that was what that scene was well done. Yeah, those were my favorite dialogue pieces. I'm sorry, I only have two or three.
Well, okay, and one of the cool things, I'm glad that you like some of them, though, because it's something where, again, I've grown up being able to recite this movie. Like, this is one of the movies, and there are several that are like this, but this is one of the movies where, like, there are people that I watch this with, like, my mom and I can go back and forth just saying the lines because we've seen this so many times.
Maybe we should do a podcast like that where it's just you reciting by memory the entire movie.
See, the problem is that I know like 60 to 90% of the movies that I can listen. So the movies that I do this with, it's like 60 to 90% like memorize. The problem is that I still need the cues.
Oh, like
So
the sounds and the scenes and things like that. Okay,
So, like,
maybe
I
we could
can
do that.
yeah.
I'll have these scene cards that I'll just push up, and then you'll just recite based on those.
I feel like it'd be easier to do like a game where you just like put up like a picture
There
of a
probably
scene
is a
and
trivia
I can.
game
That's probably a
with this,
thing
yeah.
for just solid dialogue. Anyway, but yeah, no, there's some super witty dialogue. And
Do you have a favorite scene? If you don't have favorite dialogue, do you have a favorite scene?
Actually, okay, so when I watched it, it was something where I was really surprised because, okay, so there's a scene, and it's a very controversial scene because it's where Wesley, like, raises his hand when he's in the pirate costume, and he raises his hand to Buttercup. And it's something where, for me, even though that's still not healthy, okay? But he is a man of action, and so there is a certain amount of movement and natural healthy aggression that takes place in people like that. And so what I was really intrigued by was the fact that at his worst, okay, at his absolute worst, he thinks that the love of his life has forsaken him. He's talking to her after rescuing her, and she doesn't recognize him. First of all, one of the things she loves about him are his eyes.
Right.
That's the only thing she can see, and she doesn't. Sorry, I
that
would
was
be
the
upset.
ironic part.
I would be so like okay. So right now, everyone has to wear masks.
Right.
Okay, I can still see people's faces, okay? I still recognize people. And so I get that there are some people who, when you have the mask on, you can't
that we're
see.
wearing now.
It's still covering half your face, okay? And so it's just one of those, like,
being covered,
but
right?
okay, but so with Wesley, it's something where I would also be frustrated if I'm, like, talking to someone that I care about and they don't know it's me, and I'm like, really? You haven't heard the sound of my voice, you haven't seen my eyes or my facial expressions or the way my hands move, which they by the way, just so you guys know, my hands move literally the entire time I'm speaking. There is like no point where my hands don't move. So just for visual
there's a reason
effect.
we're sitting across from each other on a very long table.
Yes, exactly. And so it's something where I just was really genuinely impressed by, in his worst, most upset, angry, frustrated, and he's been a pirate for 5 years, so he's clearly done some things, and with the person that
he's not a farm boy
he
anymore.
hates and loves, is afraid of, and wants the most, the worst that he does is the minor threat of violence, which is still, again, not necessarily healthy. I'm not advocating this. I'm simply saying, like, in his worst most people in their worst moments will hurt other people.
Sure.
Okay? And so I was just genuinely impressed that, like, with his character, that's not a part of him. So even though he's a pirate, even though he's this, like, you can still kind of believe that there was honor among pirates with him, the way that he would have led his ship. And so it was so... I hadn't thought about that much character development before with him specifically in that moment. I was always either, like, flip-flopping in between, like, I can't believe he did that, or, like, well, he's really pissed off. And so I found, like, a middle ground, and I was just really impressed by that. So
I think during that
moment,
scene, when I was watching it, to me, it just felt like very ironic commentary on her character. The idea that she would say these things, I would recognize his eyes. I know the sound of his voice. And yet he's standing right there, very obviously.
in front of her.
Right. And the camera actually makes a very obvious move there. She's talking about my eyes.
And it's his blue eyes.
And then it just shows his blue eyes right there. And so I thought that was really just it was pretty excellent commentary on the kind of, it was the analysis of her character, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't, to me, when I was watching it, I wasn't really focused on Wesley, right? That's his name.
Okay.
Wesley.
Yeah.
It was really about her and how kind of clueless and out of sync she is with reality. That
is very true, and that's something where even before Wesley died, one of the things with her character, that they kind of show it in the movie, but it's not really talked about, is the fact that she is essentially a dumb blonde. She's beautiful. She's
So she's the
really,
essential
and she's
dumb blonde.
yeah,
kind of
well, but
character.
in the best of ways because she's brave. She's
Okay.
brave to the point of stupidity, but she's brave. She cares about the people she cares about. She gives her love and affection to those she cares about very freely, and she's very, very honest. She's very blunt. She's very to the point, and something where I admire her character. And so again, she's a lovable character for me, and so it's something where they didn't do the typical blonde trope of she's like annoying and weird and wimpy and cowardly. Like, no, she's actually really brave, and she is smart. She's just also really dumb at the same time.
Right.
And hence not noticing her beloved's eyes when they're literally staring at her.
Not only are they staring at her, they're outlined by his mask.
Outlined by the mask. They're outlined by the mask, and it's just anyway, it's I love her character, and I love her more as I go through it because that is really accurate. Most people I have found when you haven't seen someone in years and you see them again, there's like a question like, is this really like, you're like I know that neck, and then you're like, do I really know that neck? Like, this is just the back of a person. Maybe I'm wrong.
Or maybe you're walking down the street and you think you see somebody.
Yeah, and then it turns out it's not them because you want to see them so badly that you're just producing them with your imagination. Like, what if she's seen Wesley so many times that she's just ignored all the signs and one of the things is she was engaged to Humperdinck for like, I think a year or two or something like that. It was like a pretty long engagement. And so before they actually got engaged, because he wanted to make sure it was a thing. He wanted the people to be in love with her before he married her so that way they could do that. So that way when she died, it would affect them even more and there would really, really be a cry for war. And so something where it's possible that Wesley totally checked in on her before this. It was just that now she was in danger, and so he needed to actually step in and rescue her. And he's one of the first people who knows, so he's obviously keeping tabs on her somehow. And so it's possible that she has seen his face, but she didn't want to. He's dead, so she had to keep that mantra of like, Wesley is dead, the love of my life is dead, in order to keep herself from having any hope.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now that you pointed that out, I've realized probably because of the on-purpose truncation of the various scenes in the story, right? Because it's done on purpose. You have these time skips, or you have these just scene skips and transition skips that there's a story in between there, but you don't know how they really got there. So the one that comes to mind is Inigo Montoya. We don't really know how he went from being knocked out, and into that drunken tirade.
Going back there.
Yeah, so we don't really know how that all happened, but we know something's there. And so what you just said just brought to mind, there's a lot of kind of world-building mystery in a sense because of the truncation. I don't know if that was done on purpose, but there is that. It was done on purpose. Like, the audience kind of questions what is going on, but it doesn't necessarily, I think because of the fast-paced nature of the movie, it's only 90 minutes, right? It's a comedy that's only
like 95,
90 minutes.
But
Yeah, 95. And then so it's you go through it so fast that you don't have much time to really think about what's being left out.
And again, it's also, keep in mind, it's supposed to be a bedtime story.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That they're trying to keep that in there. So the idea is when you have to engage a 10-year-old, or like it takes, you got to skip around a little bit. You got to make sure that you leave out the boring parts.
That makes me think about The Hobbit, because The Hobbit was originally designed as a children's story, right? It was supposed to be read at the bedtime or whatever, and each chapter is meant to be its own thing. Yeah. I wonder if there are people who still read. I'm sure there's still people who still read The Hobbit to their kids.
Yeah. No, I know several, and they're delightfully nerdy geek families, and I love them dearly, and they're amazing. But their kids get so excited about it. It's like, we're getting to like this chapter about the riddles, and they will like add. It's adorable, but it's really cool.
I wonder if anybody takes out certain points of The Hobbit, because there are points in The Hobbit that are slower, and there are parts that are darker as well. Yeah, and so I wonder if there's that kind of there's that kind of truncation going on. So there will be people that are growing up now, that are kids now. They grow up, their dad hands them The Hobbit, and they go, "What is this? It's too long." They
completely like, there were no goblins in the story my dad told. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So, well, I did that with the Lord of the Rings extended editions. I thought that I made up parts of the movie because I grew up with the extended editions.
Right.
And then I went over to
I
a friend's
remember
house.
that.
By the way, okay, both of us are, but I am a total snob. I refuse to watch the non-extended versions now
Right.
because I can't. Like, I'm like, I will bring my movies to your house in
like,
their little
it's not
collector's
the
edition
movie if
thing.
it's not the
the movie.
extended
Like, I
versions.
thought that I hallucinated parts of the movie because it wasn't in the theatrical edition. And so it's something where, like, I understand the betrayal of just like,
Of these
wait,
kids.
where to go?
Where did that part go?
Yeah. And so
Yeah, that's really interesting. Just coming back to The Princess Bride,
Yeah.
because you were talking about that scene where she is not realizing that he's right
Yeah.
there, and then right afterwards she pushes him
him.
down the hill, and that's actually my favorite scene because of how unceremonious and just very real and raw and long that downhill roll was.
You can
So-
go ahead and die for all I care. As you wish. And it's just like it's not like a brief little like, oh, face smash. Like, no,
Right.
he's actually tumbling down this hill.
Yeah, that was quite entertaining to watch, I think. And despite me not really liking the movie that much, that was one part where I did laugh out loud, and it made me chuckle a little bit just watching them just
It's
tumble
great.
down the hill. Because
Oh, yeah, and then she throws herself off the hilltop after
yeah,
him.
and she
It's
just
like, oh,
throws
my
herself
Wesley,
off.
what have I done?
But the way they roll is just so it's not. They're not tucking their arms in. They're
Nope.
not like trying
It's
to.
not
do-
attractive.
Yeah.
It's just
two people rolling
They're
down
getting
a
from
hill.
point A to point B, and it's rough.
So, I guess that was my favorite part of the movie.
It's definitely
despite
a really
it
good
being
part.
quite early. But yeah.
I feel like actually I take it back. So like I feel like that's the thought. The scene that I mentioned was the one that made me contemplate the most the last time watching it. I think
Okay.
my favorite scene is still when Inigo kills Count Rogan.
Okay.
I think that is still because you have
That's a pretty
this,
violent scene.
because well it's also because okay, Inigo's character is probably my favorite character arc because Wesley and
Right.
Buttercup love each other.
Yeah.
Obviously they're gonna be together in the end. It's really obvious. It's there. But this man has been searching for 20 years. He's losing hope that he's ever going to avenge his dad's death,
Right.
his murder. And he's losing hope, and then finally he's able to do something, and then the guy manages to get away. I think it's like 3 times. First 2 were like kind of on accident, and the third time is like he needs Fezzik in order to like help him break down the door and get there, and then he's dying. He's bleeding out in front of this man who's mocking him as the little Spanish brat who tried to kill him all those years ago, or he tried to kill all those years, whatever it was, and he puts his hand in his wounds. He's like, no, I have to avenge my father.
That part was a little bit weird to me because
Really?
that would hurt more.
But it would stop the blood from killing
would hurt
him
more.
that fast. It would, but okay, at that point he's experiencing so much pain.
Yeah, right.
His pain is meaningless compared to the honor required to avenge his dad's death.
Well, he was repeating his own line over and over, and that gave him the energy to rise up above.
he was
his
able to
wounds.
focus because it's like one of those things when you're going through a bad situation, you count. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 1, 2. You try to get yourself through the smallest moment, the smallest increment of time possible,
Right.
because you can survive that. You can survive for the next 5 seconds.
So maybe now instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it should be my name is Inigo Montoya.
You killed my father. Prepare to die. And one of the other reasons for the scene is because with the actor specifically, one of the reasons why he's so good is he's able to draw on his own personal experience where his dad was battling cancer and died.
Mhm.
So when the director of the movie came to him was basically like, hey, this needs to be as intense as you can possibly make it. What he did was Count Rogan represents the cancer that took
Yeah,
his dad away
right.
from him.
Yeah.
And so he's and so he's telling this, he's saying his name, he's saying his mission, he make a very great interview for there's a little intrigue, but it's something where he is saying his goal, he's saying what he needs to do to the thing that took his dad's life.
Yeah.
And so he's so in character and so himself that it's so real and so beautiful and raw and still somehow refined. And so that's still probably my favorite movie because the love story is there. The love story is beautiful, but the sword wizard's character arc is just it's the one that you root for. It's the one that he's the one that you cheer for.
Yeah, I think I remember. I don't remember everything I looked up after I watched the movie, But I think there was this one part where Christopher Guest, he actually talks about having to face, what's the actor's name? Inigo Montoya's actor?
It's like Mandy Patinkin. Is it Mandy? Is it Mandy? I don't remember if it's Mandy. I think it might
Let's
be Mandy.
assume it is him.
I
So
really
Mandy
hope.
Patinkin.
Sorry,
So he
dude.
was talking about having to face him as he was coming
Yeah.
on to duel him, and he was kind of like terrified.
A little
of
scared,
the
yeah,
guy.
because he was so intense.
And so I agree. Inigo Montoya is definitely my favorite character from the entire movie.
He's
So.
super solid, and I feel like that's the thing that grows with the movie is every time that as I get older and I watch this movie, Inigo's character is probably the most relatable, which is probably sad. Like, and my parents are both still alive,
right.
but like just the idea of losing someone you care about and you're devoting your life in what in your mind is honorable. But then move like it's just
well, it's making sure that
the
they haven't died in
shift.
vain, right? Or they haven't gone on in vain or something like that.
Yeah.
It's a very, very good character. I think every time I saw him, I enjoyed when he was on screen. I think he took over the film in that way. Yeah. So with that, do you have, or we talk about, how these movies that we love and things, how they affect the way that, or affect kind of the stuff that we're working on.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any kind of inspirational moment? We talked about this a little bit before, but do you have anything specifically from The Princess Bride that you kind of, on the projects that you're working on, either the poems or the stories or anything like that, do you have anything where, The Princess Bride really informs on your projects?
So I guess it's one of those. This movie is so ingrained in my person that it's one of those things that I couldn't say doesn't influence my stuff. So, with all of the stories, again, I want happy endings. I have several stories that don't have happy endings, but for the most part, most of my stories have happy endings, and I hope that they're well written. That's kind of what I'm working on, but it's also one of those. The idea of you have these people who love each other, or they're trying to figure out if they love each other, and then the doubt and the potential betrayal and the pirating and the mystery and then the villains. It's just there's so much in there. Like, for example, Prince Humperdinck, he's just someone who wants to start a war because war means money and control. And it's a very, very solid thing that it's like he's not trying to be mean, he's not trying to be cruel, he just needs Buttercup dead so that way he can incite a riot and a revolt. Or maybe he doesn't know that he's
mean and cruel.
Yeah, he doesn't get it. He just, there's no self-examination. He's very, very, he's a selfish creature. And so it's something where most of my villains tend to be at the very least somewhat attractive, and they have some very, very selfish goal. It's sometimes, so usually like the minor villains will have, or the antagonist will have like a top lofty, like for the good of all or something like that. Or
the means justify the ends.
Yeah. Like, it's just, it's the flip of that, but yes, but it's
right.
Yeah.
The ends justify the means. I said that and I realized something sounds wrong, but I didn't know what it was.
I feel like there are people who would probably say the means justify the ends. I feel like that's the healthy way, because the end justifies the means is the wrong way.
Well, if your
so
means are bad,
then
the means.
Then the end doesn't matter. But if the means are good, then it has possibility that you're going to have the end come out.
So either way, we don't agree with that sentiment.
No. But it's something where usually whoever the main villain is, like the main big bad guy, it's a very, very selfish goal in mind. And so now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like this and a couple other movies that are similar to this have a very similar goal. But yeah, I would say so. Like, obviously the costuming. So just in my own personal life, I really do have like most of Wesley's pirate costume. I have like I want the rest of it, and I want the red dress. I want it so badly. And I love that style. I don't really have a whole lot of characters that dress like that, but in the couple of stories where I do, absolutely, like, those are styles that I love. So it affects my entire life, and so it definitely affects my stories and the projects that I work on. Same thing with the dialogue. There's a lot of really, really good dialogue, and so I have a very high standard for dialogue for myself, which is sometimes really depressing because I'll write something and I'm like, this is trash because it's not up to my standards. It's not funny.
This is not Inigo Montoya.
It's not Inigo Montoya. It's not good enough. And so it's very, it's important.
Yeah, with a good dialogue, I would say it's not just well-written words or anything like
Yeah.
that, but it's the right moment, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, when the doctor says, or not doctor, but when a Christopher Guest was just like, interesting.
Yep.
That
It's
one
great.
delivery was fantastic. All right,
Yeah.
so that's about it for our movie, The Princess Bride. And so
Yeah.
the next thing that we're going to go to, which is for our next podcast, we're going to be drawing from the hat.
Woo!
And we
it's
have the hat
Isaac's
back.
turn. We do, yeah. It's basically it's the same hat. It
So
just
she's
has less
mixing it.
things on it. But all right,
Oh, it is my
Isaac.
turn, that's right.
It is Isaac's turn to pick, so we gotta do this.
All
right, you got this.
And...
You got this.
I'm trying not to look as I'm taking it out. And the next movie is going to be
What is it?
The Big Short.
Oh,
The Big
this is gonna be good.
Short.
Ah, yes.
Very,
This-
very different movie from what we've watched so far.
Yes.
We're going to be watching The Big Short for our fourth. Is this our fourth movie? I think this is our fourth movie. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this one.
Yeah.
Let's go to our dime segment.
Woo! So, so I mentioned that one of my favorite series is A Series of Unfortunate Events, okay, written by Lemony Snicket. And Lemony Snicket is one of my favorite authors because the sass and oh my gosh, it's so
Wait,
good.
Lemony Snicket
Lemony
is the
Snicket.
author?
Is the author. He's the writer of A Series of Unfortunate Events, and
Oh.
technically he's also a character
Right.
in it. Just this like he's.
I thought he
he's
was
the
just a
narrator.
character in
He's-
it.
It's both.
Okay. So
So
the
I
author's name is
haven't-
actually Lemony Snicket.
Yes. Well,
Oh.
okay.
I didn't know
So
that.
this is I enjoy the suspension of belief, okay, of disbelief. I enjoy, yes, I'm messing up. I enjoy the suspension of disbelief. So I haven't actually tried to find out if this is his real name or not.
Oh, whether
And,
it's a pseudonym or not.
This is actually something that, like, him as an author and the way that he chose the pseudonym is actually something that I genuinely adore, and I absolutely want in several of my stories where where it's the reader doesn't know is this supposed to be based on truth?
Mhm.
Like, I want that question. I love having the ability to, like, you need to question reality after or during
He's probably
this book.
never going to answer that.
He probably did somewhere.
Oh, wait, no,
I don't
right.
know.
He-
I
or
just
he
I
did
haven't
already
looked
answer it.
because I don't want to know. I
So you enjoy the mystery.
the dedications
you want
and
to know,
everything.
but you
Yeah. And so
Don't. So what is the quote?
okay, so the quote is
Great quote.
yes.
I'm just
Actually,
kidding.
he probably has something in one of his books somewhere that I can quote that's like that. But the quote that I picked, because this story is about bedtime stories, basically, is it is one of life's bitterest truths that bedtime so often arrives just when things are getting interesting. And so
That's
most.
good. That's good.
It
That's a good
is,
quote.
and it's really true. And it's just like, okay, so both of us love Calvin and Hobbes.
Right.
So it's totally something
Right.
that, like, is fitting into that thing. And so it's just something where I always found with this movie or with movies like this, like the movies that I grew up with, that the moment that and just as like a general like college age person where you have this moment of like 11 o'clock at night or midnight is when you suddenly have the energy to go and do all the creative things that you want to do, and it's like, wait, but I need sleep.
Right.
And it's just the battle between creativity and like self-care.
Mhm.
And so it's just something where this kind of spoke to me as far as with this movie where you're telling the bedtime story. He's sick, he needs to sleep, he needs to rest, but he's so excited and energetic that he's able to use the story, he's able to use the adventure and the energy to help that go along. So he gets the entertainment before bedtime and he's still able to do it. And then he's like, hey, Grandpa, can you come over and like read it again to me tomorrow? And it's like really
Right.
cute. And so I really like the idea that, yeah.
So what is the quote again? Just for me to hear, really.
It is one of life's bitterest truths that bedtime so often arrives just when things are really getting interesting.
Yeah,
So,
that's definitely true.
very true.
All right, with that,
Anyway.
we are done with our podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'm Isaac,
And I'm Rosemary.
and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
He didn't fall? Inconceivable. You keep using the word. I do not think it means what you think it means.